I never believed in monsters, not the kind from stories anyway. I thought the scariest things in the world were the ones you could see coming. Drunk drivers, house fires, maybe a black bear if you were stupid enough to get between it and food. I was wrong. So completely, horrifically wrong. And the worst part? I'm sitting here in my apartment right now, 3 years later, with a piece of my best friend's femur wrapped in cloth in the back of my closet, and I still can't bring myself to bury it or get rid of it. Because if I do, it means accepting what really happened to him out there. This was back in October 2004. I was 26, working construction in Duluth, Minnesota, and honestly pretty miserable about where my life was going. My buddy Marcus had been planning this camping trip for months, kept saying we needed to get away from everything, disconnect, you know. Just him, me, and our friend Tyler, who we'd known since high school. Tyler was the outdoorsy one, always had been. He knew these woods up near the Canadian border, deep in the Superior National Forest, places most people never went because they were so far off the main trails. We left on a Friday afternoon, packed into Marcus's old Ford Ranger. I remember the exact sandwiches we bought at the gas station on the way up. Turkey and Swiss for me, ham for Marcus, and Tyler got this massive Italian sub he ate half of before we even got to the forest. We were joking around, listening to some classic rock station that kept cutting in and out the further north we drove. It was a good drive. I felt lighter than I had in months. The plan was to hike about 8 miles into the backcountry and camp at this spot Tyler had been to once before, maybe 5 years earlier. He said there was a clearing near a small lake, totally isolated, perfect for what we wanted. We'd stay 3 nights, do some fishing, just exist without cell phones or work or any of that nonsense. None of us had service out there anyway. This was before smartphones were really a thing, and the flip phones we had were useless the second we left the main highway. We started hiking around 4 in the afternoon. The trail was well marked at first, one of those official Forest Service paths with the little wooden signs every quarter mile. But after about 3 miles, Tyler led us off onto what was basically a deer trail. It was still visible, but you had to know what you were looking for. The trees got thicker, mostly pine and birch, some maples that still had their leaves. These deep reds and oranges that looked almost unnatural in the fading light. I remember Tyler was walking ahead, Marcus right behind him, and I was in the back carrying most of the cooking gear because I'd lost rock, paper, scissors back at the truck. We were talking about stupid stuff. Tyler was going on about this girl he'd been seeing, how he thought he might actually ask her to move in with him. Marcus was giving him grief about it, saying commitment was a trap, but you could tell he was happy for him. I was only half listening, more focused on not tripping over roots, when Tyler suddenly stopped. "There it is," he said, pointing ahead through a gap in the trees. The clearing was bigger than I'd expected, maybe 150 feet across, roughly circular, with the lake on the eastern edge. The water was dark, almost black in the early evening light, and perfectly still. There were some large rocks near the shore that looked good for sitting, and the ground was mostly flat with patches of moss and some low grass. It was beautiful, honestly. Peaceful in a way that made the 8-mile hike feel worth it. We set up camp while we still had decent light. 2 tents. Tyler had his own because he snored like a chainsaw, and Marcus and I would share the other one. We got a fire going in this existing fire pit someone had made from stacked rocks, probably Tyler on his previous trip. By the time we had everything set up and had eaten some hot dogs and beans, it was fully dark. The kind of dark you don't get near cities, where the stars are so bright they almost hurt to look at. That first night was perfect. We sat around the fire drinking beers Tyler had hauled in his pack, telling old stories from high school, laughing so hard I thought I was going to be sick at one point. Around midnight, we finally called it and headed to our tents. I fell asleep almost immediately, listening to Marcus's breathing and the occasional pop from the dying fire outside. The next morning started normal. We made coffee on the camp stove, had some instant oatmeal, spent a few hours trying to catch fish in the lake with almost no success. Tyler managed to pull in one decent-sized bass around noon, but that was it. We didn't care much. Fishing was more an excuse to do nothing than an actual goal. The weather was cool but not cold, mid-50s maybe, with a grey sky that looked like it might rain but never did. In the afternoon, we decided to explore a bit. There was another trail that led away from the clearing on the northwest side, just a narrow path that wound into denser forest. Tyler thought it might lead to another lake or a stream. We grabbed some water bottles and headed out, leaving most of our stuff at camp. The trail was harder to follow than the one we'd used to get there. Several times we had to stop and figure out which direction it went, looking for broken branches or disturbed ground. We were maybe a mile from camp when Marcus spotted something off to the left of the trail. "Hey, check that out," he said, walking over to it. It was a tree, a big white pine, probably 60 feet tall, and someone had stripped the bark off a section of the trunk about 6 feet up. The exposed wood was old and weathered grey, but you could still see marks in it. Deep, parallel gouges running vertically down the trunk, 4 of them, each about an inch apart. "Bear, probably," Tyler said, though he sounded less certain than usual. "They mark territory sometimes." "Those are pretty high up," Marcus said. "Would have to be a massive bear." I reached out and put my hand near the marks. My fingers didn't span the width of them. Something about it bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. The marks were old, you could tell by the way the wood had weathered, but there was something too deliberate about them, too deep. I'd seen bear marks on trees before, and these didn't look quite right. We moved on. About a half-mile further, the trail opened up into a small depression in the ground, maybe 30 feet across, and that's where things started feeling wrong. There were bones scattered around the depression. A lot of bones. Most were small, rabbits, squirrels, maybe some birds, just white fragments mixed with the leaves and pine needles. But there were bigger pieces too. I saw what looked like part of a deer skull near the edge, and several long bones that were definitely from something large. They were old, picked completely clean, some of them cracked and split. "What the hell is this?" Marcus said quietly. Tyler was walking around the edge, careful not to step into the depression itself. "Some kind of kill site, maybe. Wolves or coyotes could have been bringing prey here." "There's too many," I said. My voice sounded weird in my own ears, too loud. "And why would they bring them all to the same spot?" Nobody had a good answer for that. We stood there for another minute or two, just looking at this scattered graveyard of bones. And then by unspoken agreement, we all turned around and headed back towards camp. The walk back was quiet. Marcus kept looking over his shoulder. We got back to the clearing maybe an hour before sunset. I tried to shake off the weird feeling from the bone pit, told myself it was just animals being animals. We made dinner, freeze-dried beef stroganoff that tasted like cardboard but was hot and filling, and got the fire going again. That's when Tyler noticed the smell. "You guys smell that?" he asked, wrinkling his nose. I did. It was faint at first, but getting stronger. A rotten, sweet smell, like meat that had gone bad. Really bad. The kind of smell that makes your stomach turn over. "Probably a dead animal nearby," Marcus said, but he didn't sound convinced. Wind must have shifted. The smell got worse as the sun went down. By the time it was full dark, it was almost unbearable. This thick, putrid stench that seemed to coat the inside of your nose and throat. We kept the fire going bigger than we needed to. I think partly to try to cover the smell, partly because none of us wanted to admit we were starting to feel uneasy. Around 10 p.m, we heard the first scream. It came from somewhere out in the forest, to the north, past where we'd found the bones. At first, I thought it was an animal, a fox maybe, or a rabbit being attacked by something. But it was too long, too sustained. It started low and rose to this high, shrieking pitch that went on for maybe 10 seconds before cutting off abruptly. We all froze. Marcus had been in the middle of saying something about his job, and his mouth just hung open. The forest had gone completely silent after the scream. No insects, no wind rustling leaves, nothing. Just the crackle of our fire. "The hell was that?" Marcus finally said. "Fox," Tyler said quickly. "They can sound almost human sometimes, when they're mating or fighting." "That didn't sound like any fox I've ever heard," I said. We sat there listening, barely breathing, waiting for it to happen again. 5 minutes passed, 10. Gradually, normal forest sounds started coming back. Branches moving in wind, something small rustling in the underbrush. The smell was still there, but maybe not quite as strong, or maybe we were just getting used to it. We tried to go back to our conversation, but it was forced. All of us were listening, waiting. Around 11, Marcus said he was going to turn in. Tyler said he'd stay up a bit longer, keep the fire going. I should have gone to bed too, but I felt too wired, too on edge, so I stayed up with Tyler. We didn't talk much, just sat there watching the fire, occasionally feeding it more wood. The lake was perfectly still, reflecting what little moonlight made it through the clouds. I kept thinking about those scratches on the tree, those bones in the pit. Kept telling myself there was a logical explanation for everything. That's when we saw the footprint. Tyler had gotten up to grab more firewood from the pile we'd made near his tent. He was on his way back when he stopped suddenly, his headlamp beam fixed on the ground just outside the ring of firelight. "Don't move," he said quietly. I stood up and walked over to him. He pointed at the ground. It was a footprint, a big one pressed into a patch of soft dirt near the edge of our clearing. At first, I thought it was a bear print. It was roughly the right size, maybe 12 inches long, but the shape was wrong. It looked almost human, an elongated human foot, but massive, with what looked like claw marks at the front where toes would be. "That's not a bear," I said. My voice came out as barely a whisper. Tyler didn't respond. He was moving his headlamp around slowly, and that's when we saw there were more. A line of them, coming from the forest edge on the north side, moving through our camp area about 20 feet from the tents, then heading back into the forest on the south side. Whatever had made them had walked right through our camp while we were by the fire, keeping just outside the range of light. "We need to wake up Marcus," Tyler said. Marcus was not happy about being woken up, but his irritation died pretty quick when he saw the prints. We stood there looking at them with our flashlights and headlamps, trying to make sense of it. "Could someone be messing with us?" Marcus suggested. "Making fake prints to scare us?" "Who?" I said. "We're 8 miles from the nearest trail. We haven't seen another person in 2 days. Maybe they're old prints from before we got here." But they weren't old. They were fresh, pressed into soil that was still slightly damp from dew. Some of them had partial prints overlapping ours from when we'd set up camp. We made a decision that probably seems obvious now. We should have packed up immediately and hiked out, even in the dark. But at the time, it felt almost more dangerous to be out on the trail at night than to stay put. Plus, we had the fire, we had each other. 3 grown men, one of us with a hunting knife, all of us with decent-sized rocks within reach. We convinced ourselves we could handle it. We decided to keep watching shifts. Tyler would stay up until 2 a.m, then wake me for 2 to 4, then I'd wake Marcus for 4 until sunrise. We'd keep the fire going all night, stay alert. In the morning, we'd pack up and hike out. Tyler's shift passed without incident as far as I know. He woke me up at 2, looking exhausted. I told him to go sleep in my spot in the tent with Marcus, so he'd feel safer and I'd take his tent. He didn't argue. I've never been good at staying awake when I'm tired, but the adrenaline from earlier was still in my system. I kept the fire bright, probably used twice as much wood as necessary. The smell was still there, faint now, but present, like it was woven into the air itself. Every sound made me jump, branches falling, some animal moving through brush far off, the wind picking up and making the tent fabric flutter. Around 3:15 a.m, I heard footsteps. Not animal footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy footsteps, coming from the forest to the north, the same direction those tracks had come from. I stood up fast, grabbed a piece of firewood like a club, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The footsteps stopped at the edge of the clearing, maybe 40 feet from where I stood. I couldn't see anything beyond the ring of firelight, just darkness and the vague shapes of trees. But I could feel something there, watching. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound brave and failing completely. Nothing. No response. But I swear I could hear breathing. Slow, deep breathing, like something large drawing air through nostrils or a throat. I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes. The breathing continued. At one point, I thought I saw movement, something tall and thin shifting between trees. But it was so dark, I couldn't be sure if I was really seeing it, or if my brain was just creating shapes from shadows. Then it started moving again. I could hear it walking, circling around the clearing to the east, toward the lake. The footsteps were heavy enough that I could feel them faintly through the ground. Whatever this thing was, it was massive. I should have woken up Marcus and Tyler. I should have screamed, should have done something. But I was frozen, rooted to the spot, just listening to this thing slowly walking in a wide circle around our camp, staying just outside the light. It took maybe 10 minutes to make the full circuit, and then the footsteps stopped on the south side. The breathing continued. I stood there gripping that piece of firewood so hard my hands were shaking, staring into the darkness, until gradually the sky started getting lighter in the east. The breathing stopped. I didn't hear footsteps moving away, it was just suddenly gone, like it had never been there. When Marcus's watch alarm went off at 4 a.m, I nearly jumped out of my skin. He came out of the tent yawning, took one look at my face and stopped. What happened? I told him everything. The footsteps, the breathing, the feeling of being watched. I expected him to tell me I'd been hearing things, that it was just stress and lack of sleep, but he didn't. He just nodded slowly, looking out at the forest. We're leaving as soon as there's enough light to see the trail, he said. Tyler agreed when we woke him up a few minutes later. We broke camp in record time, barely talking, just shoving things into packs. By the time the sun was fully up, maybe 6:30 or so, we were ready to go. That's when Tyler realised something was wrong. "Where's the food bag?" he said. We'd hung our food in a bear bag the first night, standard practice to keep animals from getting into it. Tyler had strung it up in a tree on the north edge of the clearing, about 15 feet off the ground. The rope was still there, tied around the trunk, but the bag was gone and the rope had been cut. Not chewed, cut cleanly, about 8 feet up. None of us had a knife that could reach that high, and there were no climbing marks on the tree trunk. "Whatever was here last night took it," Marcus said quietly. We didn't debate it, we just started hiking. The trail back felt different in the daylight. Maybe it was just knowing something was out there, but every shadow seemed darker, every snapping branch sounded like footsteps. We moved fast, faster than we probably should have with full packs, barely stopping except to catch our breath. We were about 4 miles from the clearing when Tyler stopped suddenly. He was in the lead again, and he held up his hand for us to halt. "What?" I started, but he cut me off with a gesture. "Mummy." He was looking off to the left of the trail, into the trees. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach drop. There was something standing about 60 feet away, in the shadows between the pines. Something tall, maybe 7 or 8 feet, and thin. Too thin. It looked almost like a person, but the proportions were wrong. The limbs were too long, the torso too narrow, and it was perfectly still, just standing there among the trees, watching us. We all saw it this time. I heard Marcus make a small sound behind me, something between a gasp and a whimper. For maybe 10 seconds, we all just stood there frozen, staring at this thing and having it stare back at us. I couldn't make out any features. It was too far away and the shadows were too deep, but I could see the general shape of it, impossibly tall and thin and wrong. Then Tyler said very quietly, "Walk. Don't run. Just walk normal speed. Don't look at it." We did. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, turning my back on that thing and walking away at a normal pace when every instinct was screaming at me to run. But we did it. We walked maybe 30 seconds, and then Tyler said we could look. We all turned around at once. It was still there, still perfectly motionless, but it was closer now, maybe only 40 feet from the trail. It hadn't walked. We would have heard it. It had just moved. "Walk faster," Tyler said. "Not running, but faster." We did. And every 30 seconds or so, one of us would glance back. Each time it was closer, 40 feet, then 30, then maybe 20, closing the distance without moving, without making sound. Just appearing closer each time we looked, like a glitch in reality. When it was maybe 15 feet from the trail, Marcus broke. He just started running, crashing through the underbrush, his pack bouncing wildly. Tyler and I lasted maybe 2 seconds longer before we ran too. I don't know how long we ran. Miles, probably. My lungs were screaming, my legs felt like they were going to give out, but I kept going because I could hear something behind us. Not footsteps, something worse. Branches breaking, a rushing sound like something large moving through the forest at impossible speed. And underneath it all, a sound I can barely describe. A rattling, clicking noise, like bones knocking together. At some point, Tyler tripped. I saw him go down hard, his pack flying off his shoulders, and without thinking I stopped and grabbed him, hauling him to his feet. Marcus was ahead of us, still running, and I screamed his name. He didn't stop. Maybe he didn't hear me over his own panicked breathing and the sound of whatever was chasing us. Or maybe he heard me and chose not to stop. I'll never know. Tyler and I ran. We were slower now, both exhausted, but we kept going. The sounds behind us were getting closer. I could smell that rotten meat stench again, so strong it made me gag. Then suddenly, we burst out onto the main trail, the official one with the wooden markers. We'd made it. Tyler collapsed immediately, gasping for air, and I bent over with my hands on my knees, trying not to vomit. "Where's Marcus?" Tyler managed to get out between breaths. I looked back the way we'd come. The deer trail we'd been on stretched back into the forest, narrow and dark. There was no sign of Marcus. "Marcus!" I shouted. "Marcus!" Nothing. Just silence from the forest. We stood there calling his name for maybe 5 minutes, but he didn't answer. Tyler wanted to go back in, but I grabbed his arm. "We'll get lost," I said. "We don't know exactly which way we came from. We need to get help, get rangers, get search and rescue." Tyler looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew I was right. So we started jogging down the main trail toward where we'd left the truck, both of us still calling Marcus's name every few minutes, listening for any response. And we didn't get one. We reached the parking area around 2 p.m. Marcus's truck was still there, the only vehicle in the lot. My legs were shaking so bad I could barely stand. Tyler fumbled with the keys. Marcus had given them to him that first morning, and we both climbed in. The drive to the nearest ranger station took 40 minutes. Tyler was crying silently the whole way, just tears running down his face while he drove. I felt numb, like none of it was real, like I was going to wake up any second back in my apartment in Duluth. The rangers took our report seriously, I'll give them that. We were within 2 hours, they had a search team mobilising. We tried to explain where we'd been, where we'd last seen Marcus, but it was hard to describe. Tyler drew a rough map from memory. They asked if we'd been drinking, if we'd taken any drugs. We said no. They asked what we thought had been chasing us. We said we didn't know. Something large, maybe a bear. We didn't mention the footprints or the thing standing in the trees or any of it because we knew how it sounded. The search went on for 3 days. We stayed at a motel in the nearest town, a place called Ely, about an hour from the forest, and drove back each day to wait for news. They had dogs, helicopters, teams of experienced search and rescue volunteers. They found our campsite. They found Tyler's pack where he dropped it. They found our original tracks. They never found Marcus. On the 4th day, the ranger leading the search sat down with us in a small office that smelled like coffee and old paper. He was in his 50s, weathered face, kind eyes that had seen bad things before. "I'm not going to lie to you boys," he said. "After this long, in this terrain, the chances of finding your friend alive are essentially 0. We'll keep the case open, keep our eyes out, but the official search is being called off tomorrow morning." Tyler lost it then. Started yelling about how they weren't trying hard enough, how they didn't understand, how something was out there, and they needed to find it. I just sat there staring at the wall, that numb feeling spreading through my whole body. They asked us more questions over the next few days. Different rangers, then local police, then county sheriff's deputies. The questions got harder. Why had we split up? Why had Tyler and I left Marcus behind? Were we sure there hadn't been an argument? Maybe things got physical. We told them the same story every time, and each time I could see the doubt in their eyes. They didn't believe us. They thought we'd done something to him. They searched our backgrounds, talked to our employers, our families, found nothing concerning. We were just 3 normal guys who'd gone camping. Eventually, they seemed to accept that we were telling the truth as we understood it, even if the truth didn't make sense. Tyler and I drove back to Duluth a week after Marcus disappeared. We didn't talk much on the drive. At one point, Tyler said, "We shouldn't have left him." I didn't have an answer for that. Because he was right. We shouldn't have. But we did. I tried to go back to work, but I couldn't focus. I'd be up on a roof nailing down shingles, and suddenly I'd be back in those woods, hearing that breathing, seeing that impossibly tall figure standing in the shadows. I had nightmares every night. Marcus screaming for help while I ran away, or that thing with the long limbs standing at the foot of my bed, just watching me. Tyler fell apart faster than I did. He started drinking heavily, lost his job at the hardware store, stopped answering his phone. I tried to check on him a few times, but he wouldn't let me in his apartment. The last time I saw him was maybe 4 months after the trip. He looked terrible, thin, unwashed, with eyes that were either too empty or too wide. He said he'd been doing research, trying to figure out what was out there. He'd found stories about something called a Wendigo, some kind of creature from Native American legends, a spirit of winter and famine that ate human flesh and was never satisfied. The descriptions matched what we'd seen. Tall, emaciated, moving too fast, associated with an awful smell. I told him it was just a legend, that there had to be another explanation. He laughed, but there was no humour in it. "You saw it," he said. "You heard it. You smelled it. And you're trying to tell me it's not real? He wasn't wrong. I just didn't want him to be right. Tyler overdosed 6 months later. Pills and alcohol. His sister called to tell me. She said they'd found research materials all over his apartment. Printouts about Wendigo legends, maps of the Superior National Forest with areas circled, journals full of rambling notes about what we'd seen. At the funeral, she pulled me aside and asked if I knew what he'd been obsessed with. I told her I didn't know. I lied. Marcus was officially declared deceased 1 year and 1 day after he disappeared. His parents held a memorial service. They asked me to speak, and I did, though I barely remember what I said. Something about how Marcus was a good friend, how he'd always been the one to bring people together, how he'd wanted this camping trip to be an escape from everyday stress. His mum hugged me afterward and thanked me for being there with him at the end. I felt like I was going to throw up. The nightmares got worse after that. In them, Marcus would be calling my name from the forest, and I'd go looking for him. I'd find that clearing again, and our camp would still be set up, but everything would be covered in ice and snow even though it was summer. And standing at the edge of the clearing would be that thing, that impossibly tall, impossibly thin figure, and I'd finally see its face, or what passed for a face. Sunken holes where eyes should be, skin pulled tight over a skull that was too long and a mouthful of teeth that went back too far. I started seeing a therapist 2 years ago, told her about the camping trip, though I left out most of the supernatural stuff. Just said we'd gotten lost, Marcus had disappeared, Tyler had died, I felt guilty. She diagnosed me with PTSD and survivor's guilt, gave me medication that helped me sleep but didn't stop the dreams, taught me coping strategies that worked about half the time. What I never told her, what I've never told anyone except you now, is what I found when I finally forced myself to go back. It was last October, 3 years and 1 month after Marcus disappeared. I don't know why I decided to go. Maybe I thought I'd find closure, or proof that it had all been some kind of shared delusion. Maybe I just needed to face it. I went alone, took a week off work, drove up to Ely, stayed at the same motel we'd stayed at before, spent 2 days working up the courage to actually go into the forest. On the 3rd day, I packed a day pack with water, first aid kit, GPS device, emergency beacon, everything I should have had the first time, and started hiking. I found the clearing. It took most of the day, but I found it. The fire pit was still there, half collapsed. Our tent stakes were still in the ground, rusted. The tree where Tyler had hung the bear bag still had rope around the trunk, weathered and frayed. And I found bones. They were scattered around the edge of the clearing, mixed with leaves and pine needles, same as that other site we'd found. Small ones mostly, animals, but there were larger pieces too, and that's when I saw it. A human femur, unmistakable in its shape, with shreds of cloth still wrapped around one end. The cloth was red and black flannel. Marcus had been wearing a red and black flannel shirt that day. I stood there for a long time, just looking at it. Part of me wanted to leave it there, pretend I'd never seen it. Part of me wanted to gather up every piece I could find and bring him home. In the end, I took just that one bone. I wrapped it in my spare shirt, put it carefully in my pack. I reported it to the rangers when I got back, told them I'd found what I thought was human remains. They went back with me the next day, brought a forensics team. They searched the area thoroughly, found a few more bone fragments that might have been human, might not have been. Not enough for DNA testing, not enough to prove anything. The official statement was that they'd found evidence suggesting Marcus had died in the forest, probably from exposure or animal predation, but there wasn't enough remains for conclusive identification or cause of death. Case closed, more or less. His parents were notified. They took the news quietly. I think on some level they'd known since the beginning. I kept the femur. I know that's weird, maybe illegal, definitely unhealthy according to any therapist. But I couldn't let them take it. It's all that's left of him. All that proved he existed, that our friendship existed, that any of it was real. It's in my closet now, wrapped in cloth, sitting in a shoebox on the top shelf. Sometimes, late at night, I take it out and just hold it. The bone is clean, completely clean, like something scoured it. But if I look closely in good light, I can see marks on it. Scratches, grooves, teeth marks, I think, though I try not to think about that too hard. I've tried to move on. I really have. I got a better job, started seeing someone new, tried to build a life that isn't defined by what happened in those woods, but it's always there, in the back of my mind, in my dreams, in every dark forest I pass while driving. Sometimes I research Wendigo legends, same as Tyler did. I read accounts from fur traders in the 1800s, from Native American oral histories, from scattered modern-day encounters that sound eerily similar to ours. The details are always the same: tall, emaciated figures, the smell of rot, inhuman speed, an insatiable hunger for human flesh. The stories say that people who resort to cannibalism in times of starvation can become Wendigos themselves, cursed to forever hunger for the one thing they should never eat. Others say they're spirits, demons, something that exists in the spaces between our world and something else. I don't know what we encountered out there. Maybe it was a Wendigo. Maybe it was something else, something that hasn't been named yet. Maybe Tyler was right to obsess over it, to try to find answers. Or maybe that's what drove him to his death. The need to understand something that can't be understood. What I do know is this: Marcus died out there, died scared and alone while his two best friends ran away. And whatever took him, whatever killed him, is still in those woods, still waiting, still hungry. I'll never go back. I can't. The guilt would destroy me, being in that place again, seeing that clearing, knowing I left him behind. But I think about it constantly. Wonder if he's angry with me. Wonder if he suffered. Wonder what he saw in those final moments. The forest around the Superior National Forest is thousands of square miles of dense wilderness. Hundreds of people go missing in national forests every year. Did you know that? Hikers, campers, hunters. Most are found eventually, or their remains are. But some just vanish completely, no trace, no explanation. The official reports blame exposure, getting lost, animal attacks, natural causes. I wonder how many of them ran into what we did. How many of those missing people are scattered around clearings deep in the woods, their bones picked clean, while families wait for answers that will never come. And I wonder if it's still there, at that clearing by the dark lake. If it returns there regularly, like animals return to good hunting grounds. If it's waiting for someone else to come stumbling into its territory, following a deer trail 8 miles from the nearest help, thinking they're safe because they're together, because they're rational adults who don't believe in monsters. I used to not believe in monsters either. I was wrong. 3 years later, I still sleep with a light on. I still check the locks on my doors and windows multiple times before bed. I still can't be in a forest after dark. Can barely go hiking during the day without panic rising in my chest. And I still wake up sometimes convinced I can hear that breathing. Slow, deep, patient, just outside my bedroom window. I survive with Marcus's bone in my closet. A piece of my best friend that I couldn't save, wrapped in cloth, because I can't stand to look at it, but can't bring myself to let it go. They say guilt is the price we pay for love, and if that's true, I'm paying interest for the rest of my life. I don't know why. I survived when Marcus didn't. Don't know why Tyler managed to escape that first time only to die later from what it did to his mind. Don't know what any of it means, or if there's a lesson to be learned beyond some things in the world can't be explained, can't be fought, can only be fled from if you're lucky. The Superior National Forest is still there, the trails are still open, people still camp deep in the backcountry, still hike miles from civilization, still think they're safe because this is America in the 21st century and monsters aren't real. I hope they're right. I hope what happened to us was an isolated incident, a 1 in a million encounter with something that's mostly dormant, mostly stays hidden. I hope no one else ever has to stand in a clearing at 3 a.m. smelling rot and hearing breathing and knowing, absolutely knowing, that something's watching from the darkness, waiting. But deep down, I don't think that's true. Deep down, I think it's still there, still hungry, still patient. And someday, someone else is going to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they're going to learn the same lesson we did. That the scariest things in the world aren't the ones you can see coming. They're the ones you don't believe exist until it's too late. If you're reading this, if you're planning a trip into deep wilderness, please listen to me. If you smell something rotten where there shouldn't be rot, if you find bones gathered in strange places, if you see footprints that don't match any animal you know, if you hear breathing in the darkness or see something impossibly tall standing between the trees, leave. Immediately. Don't investigate. Don't try to rationalize it. Don't think you can handle it. Just run. Run and don't look back. Don't stop to help your friends if they fall behind. Don't try to be brave. Just survive. Because I promise you, whatever's out there doesn't care about your courage, or your rationality, or your refusal to believe in monsters. It just cares that you're made of meat, and it's so hungry. I know because I survived. But I shouldn't have. Marcus should have. Tyler should have. They were better people than me. They deserved to make it out. Instead, I'm here. Alive. Haunted. Holding onto a piece of bone from my dead friend's leg. The only proof I have that any of it was real, and not just some shared nightmare. 3 years later, and I still don't have answers. Still don't know exactly what we encountered. Still wake up sometimes certain I hear that clicking, rattling sound of bones knocking together, getting closer. The Wendigo, if that's what it was, doesn't just haunt that forest. It haunts me every day, every night, in every shadow that's a little too dark, every sound that doesn't quite fit, every moment when I'm alone, and my brain supplies that memory of something impossibly tall and thin standing perfectly still, watching, waiting. And I think that's what makes it even worse. Because Marcus died quickly, probably. Tyler eventually found peace, in his own terrible way. No, but me, I get to live with it. Forever. The guilt, the fear, the knowledge. I get to survive. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, when I'm staring at the ceiling, listening to every tiny sound in my apartment, I wonder if that was the cruelest part. If whatever was out there let me go not as mercy, but because living with what I'd seen, what I'd done, running away and leaving Marcus behind, was a worse fate than death. Maybe it's still feeding on me even now, just in a different way. I don't know. I'll never know. That's the worst part of all of this. Not having answers. Just questions, guilt, fear, and a bone wrapped in cloth in the back of my closet that I can't bury and can't throw away. The only thing I know for certain is this. Something is out there in those woods. Something that shouldn't exist but does. And it's still hungry. Always hungry. God help anyone who goes looking for it.